the most fundamental aspects of business management, but also how to build organizations that are a joy to work on, that produce things that people actually need, and that make you money along the way. So I've been working with over 100 different teams over the last decade. In the last 7 years, exclusively in Web3. And my company focuses on very diligent user research and market research processes. So we always design and build things, but then also validate them with real world humans. And there's 3 things that we found that the most successful companies do really well that are almost entirely lacking from the startup space. And those are internal cohesion, so being aligned on internal goals and processes. User and market research, so understanding what your users and stakeholders actually need and want and will pay for. And resource management, so managing your attention, labor, and money relative to the goals, but also in line with the constantly evolving macroeconomic environment. And so first I want to show you why I think that focusing on these things is very important, particularly right now. And then I'm going to break down each of these steps and show you the most common pitfalls, but also how to do it right, at least based on my research and in the context of DAOs. So in the last bull market, a lot of investors funneled a lot of money into projects that ended up collapsing, failing. And so obviously this time, everybody's way more careful. Their limited partners and investors are also wondering what you guys do with the money. And in addition to that, the economy is also very uncertain. So it's very difficult to raise funds. And what we also see is that there's a huge increase in startup collapse for mostly these reasons, because a lot of money went into things that didn't actually matter. In addition to that, similar to the last bull market, we also experienced an increase in developers and inexperienced contributors, which is not a bad thing per se, but it just increases the noise. And with AI, it's much easier now to fabricate fake projects and create a lot of noise, even more noise in an already uncertain market. So what I wanted to show you today is not only how you can stand out and kind of differentiate yourself from the competition, but also how you can keep your running costs as low as possible so that you might not even need any external investment at all. And if you're an investor, this is going to help you basically identify undervalued opportunities, but also establish meaningful relationships with your portfolio companies. So the very first thing that we noticed was that most teams were not really aligned on their goals and their internal processes, or they were very vague. So this is an example of a goal. The top one is a successful project. So as you can see, it's pretty granular. They have aligned on pretty much exactly what they're trying to achieve. It still exists. Some of you might actually know it. And the bottom is an example of a project that ended up collapsing. So it's pretty vague. There was not a lot of alignment. It's like not clear what the data engine is. What's the engine? What's the blockchain economy? Where is behind the blockchain economy? And as a consequence of like not being clearly aligned on these goals or even being too vague, a lot of founders tend to just get into conflict or argue and then separate because they can't really focus on what they're trying to achieve together. And then they hire new talent. They work with new people for several months, grind through a lot of money, and then after months, they end up firing totally capable people because they end up blaming each other, or some mistakes happen, but it's actually not really mistakes. It's just that there was no record of responsibilities and no alignment on what people should be doing in the organization. So the very first thing that I kind of recommend doing is to just create a mission statement and focus on what you're trying to achieve together and be aligned on that. And it's very simple. Like it's usually has the format of we are building X for Y so that Z. The why I'll mention in a second, but you can get there by aligning your team on what exactly is it that you're doing, how are you doing it, and also why. And then in addition to that, you might also look into what your values are. What do you care about? What's important for you in the future? What future do you want to see? Because these are the statements that will actually differentiate yourself from projects that are very similar or do something that's close to you. So in addition to the mission and values, there's also standard operating procedures. This is something that exists in most companies that do things consistently really well. And it's basically just a documentation of work. So an easy way to look at how to document things that really work throughout time is kind of like this. So this is just an easy kind of reference diagram for basically how most people organize in society for like tens of thousands of years. So people kind of gather into context-based groups. This is important because they have goals that are relative to the overarching mission of the whole organization. Within that, there are like time constraints. So these time-based collaboration that makes sure that people stay aligned and hold each other accountable to do things. I'll get into that later. And then individual workflows. And if you can map that out, this is particularly important for DAOs because you have companies that, like traditional companies, have certain constraints. And so you can rely on interpersonal like communication and knowledge that is kind of tacit. But with DAOs, people come and go. So one person might come into your organization, then just contribute a little bit, then leave, and then their knowledge is gone. So you have to capture everything so that over time, the organization actually can still persist. So that when people come back, everything still works because you know what works and you wrote it down and you made it explicit. A really cool tool, by the way, for internal alignment that I can really recommend is from Jake Knapp, who wrote the Sprint book. It's called Note and Vote. You can Google it. It's a great Medium article. And the purpose of that is basically to reduce all kinds of discussion that is completely unnecessary. So if you find yourself often in meetings that just don't go anywhere and you feel like you're wasting your life, then this is one of the best solutions to that problem, because what happens is that rather than discussing and over discussing the same thing over and over again, which takes weeks, you just ask everybody to like, hey, let's write everything down, like write all the problems down that you can perceive, put it on a wall, put it on Post-its, and then let's read through that and vote on the things that matter the most. So then you have like sticky notes, or if you use Miro or whiteboard, online whiteboard, you within minutes prioritize what everybody in the room thinks actually matters. And save potentially weeks. All right, so this is the first part. You're still with me? Second part is user research. So my experience, and based on my research, our research, almost 50% of the users we spoke to don't actually trust the products that they interacted with. This is from all Web3 products over the last 7 years. And this usually comes from the fact that teams don't really have adequate market research processes, or any at all. But if they have them, they usually ask the wrong questions or interview the wrong people. I often get questions of like, hey, Andre, can you give me some feedback? And I'm like, I'm not your target audience. You should talk to people who actually use your product. And so as a consequence of that, these teams have spent years and literally millions of dollars on highly technical infrastructure that they end up shipping, and then nobody's using it. And the token, like, I mean, it's even silly to mention any tokens in that scenario, but obviously no one wants to buy it, everybody sells it. And the project collapses because at that point they don't have any money to fix the initial issues because they focus too much on growing really quickly. So if you want to avoid that, there's really only 3 things that you need to know or like consistently pay attention to. Who are your stakeholders and users? How do they describe their problem? And then how do they describe your solution to the problem? So the users and stakeholders are usually just people who the team, like in successful teams, that they already know. They already think about who is someone I know who has a problem that I'm interested in solving, or that we are interested in solving. And that way you kind of get away into their social network and can explore other people and like meet other people who need that solution too. Then you interview them. And please don't ask them what people need. People don't know what they need or what they want. We all want everything. So if you just ask them a wide question, it's not going to get to a specific result. But rather, like, these are kind of questions that give you higher quality results. So try to ask open-ended questions, obviously not leading them, and retrieve their past experience. So if you ask people about their historical experience and the challenges that they were facing in the past, it will give you a lot of really good insights into what you need to solve in their words. And so then you usually would build a prototype or experiment with something or a test service or something, and you create a solution. And then you can answer the third question by showing the prototype to the same people and then listening to how they describe what they see. And so I know we're always excited about our cool stuff that we build, and we want to talk about it and we explain it. But in order to answer how they describe their problem, we need to listen really carefully and look at the specific words that they use in order to describe what they like about the thing, what they maybe didn't like, what could be improved, and also how it fits into their personal life. Because the words that they use will be the same words that you can reuse in your branding, marketing material in order to share what you're building with other people. Because by that time, you've learned a new language. You've learned to speak the language of your users. And if you speak the language of your users will trust you, which is, as we've seen, one of the core issues. And so that will attract more and more people to your actual ecosystem and organically produce growth of what you're building, because people actually recognize the solution to their problem, and you'll see that you're actually helping them. Okay, and lastly, we never found a team that actually had a treasury policy or had any kind of guidelines on how they manage their resources, whether it's labor or money. Most teams kept millions of dollars in their bank account, and we have DeFi tools, so we can actually leverage those to at least somehow protect the wealth or like the money that we have against inflation. Or like, even if you don't have a lot of money, you can at least leverage even traditional financing instruments in order to extend your runway, or pay attention, or even if you don't have that much money that you think is reasonable, still a treasury policy makes sense, because you clarify really, really early what are the wallets you have, who is using the wallets, how are you using them, what software are you buying, how do you make expenses, what do you like financially prioritize, and how do you financially prioritize your attention throughout time. So these three areas, I think, are kind of the pillars of adequate business management, at least for me, and the incremental progression by paying attention to these three areas. Your goal is to essentially incrementally progress towards the highest value density. So how can you interpret all of these things, so what your team is aligned on, what you see from your users, and how you kind of like manage your resources so that you can produce higher value for a higher paying customer with more efficiency. And a really cool tool for that is from engineering. I mean, probably most of you know that. Oh, this is a different slide. From engineering, which is Agile sprints. This is the time-based projects. Like, we've used that in engineering. We know it works. We know how to build technical infrastructure, but you can use exactly the same process to literally organize every single team around any type of work. So get your team together, align on what needs to be done, set yourself a deadline, do a retrospective, figure out, has that worked? Well, yes, great, let's do it again, let's capture it, let's keep going. Did that not work? Well, okay, cool, then let's still capture that, because this is what makes us really unique, and let's try something different. And so that way you'll step by step incrementally get closer and closer to your goals and to your mission, and always learn something new. So all of these things, all of these three areas, you can consistently pay attention to regardless of your stage. Like, even if you don't have a product, even if you don't have a service, even if you don't have any investment, you can always look at like, are you actually still internally aligned on your goals? Do you know what your audience needs and what they will pay for? And they will tell you what they will pay for, because you'll ask them to pay for something that you know is already valuable based on their feedback. And are you paying attention to all these things and how you distribute your resources and take small incremental risks? Just 7 years ago, DeepWorks started completely with zero financing, and we built 2 different products. And we have a thriving community of the smartest and most enjoyable people that I've ever met in my life. And they love what they do. And I really want to see a future in which we all are surrounded by cool organizations, which we can join and contribute with our skills and build really things that humans need and help them, and obviously also make money along the way. And I think if we all get a little bit better at these 3 things slowly over time, then we can get there pretty soon. And yeah, with that, I wish you all the best for your projects, and I hope you build the best DAOs that we can imagine. And thank you. Oh, if you're interested, I'm also writing a bi-weekly newsletter. This is the QR code to the newsletter, but you can also obviously check out the other links. Our entire organization is fully transparent. So the newsletter is kind of sharing. In newsletter, I'm sharing every 2 weeks our internal progress, like what actually happens, what is going on. But you can also explore how we work and what we do in real time through the software that we build, which is usually also mentioned in the newsletter. So yeah, thank you so much, and I'm really excited to see all the Web3 ecosystem flourish by becoming more focused on really what matters. Have a nice day.